Hi, Brian. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Beautiful. And thank you for being here. And you see, I want to thank you, Brian, for two things. All right. Firstly, thank you for investing in yourself. You see, some months back, Brian, I was passing by a mango tree, and the tree didn't really catch my attention. Why? Because it's got no fruit. I just passed by, and you see, just recently I was passing by that same road and I sighted the same mango tree from afar and it caught my attention. Then I moved so close. Then I was so wowed. Why? Because the mango tree's got a lot of mango fruits now. And I was really excited. Wow, this is amazing. The point is, the fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming who you are today, that attracted me to you. The end result of all of those actions put together attracted me to you and even several others. So I thank you for that. I thank you for that. Now, the second reason is thank you so very much for honoring the invite. I truly appreciate it. And to get started, I am quite excited to have Brian on the show today for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking, because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, I believe it takes the application of knowledge. And you see, Brian, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. Yeah, so that's going to make our conversation here today very important to me and even to the listeners. The second reason why I'm excited to have Brian on the show is for the sake of the listeners. Brian, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got a lot of information flying out there. So these folks trust me for quality information. And that's why when I came across your profile, I was excited because I believe our conversation is going to be insightful. So for that reason, Brian, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or professional journey. We're just so curious. We want to know how you got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Brian, over
Okay,
to you.
sure. So, from a personal perspective, Elijah, I am a proud husband. I met my wife in high school. We are high school sweethearts, have been together ever since. We have four beautiful kids. I'll talk anyone's ear off about any one of them. I have the privilege of having two kids who are adopted, which is unique and it's just been a wonderful experience for my family. On a professional level, I'm a lawyer. I'm a trial lawyer. I'm based primarily in the state of California. I'm the managing partner of a law firm called Greenberg Gross. We're a full service law firm that has a number of different areas of practice, but currently, at least in terms of from my perspective, we specialize in cases involving childhood sexual assault, employment law on behalf of employees who are wronged in the workplace, some business litigation cases, and some personal injury cases. But I essentially run a law firm that has over 50 employees and over 20 attorneys, and we have four offices in three separate states.
Amazing. I love what you're doing. Because of your presence, all right, there will be a lot of assault on children like that, sexual assault that will be impossible to happen. Those very wicked people now, once they understand that there is a firm that works against what they do, it builds fear within them. And in other words, you're doing a great job, changing the world and helping all of this evil stop. So I truly love that, and that's a good one. So we're going to begin first with what inspired you to venture into that aspect of life. Okay, can you talk to us about what inspired you?
Inspired me to become a lawyer, or inspired me to deal specifically with childhood sexual assault?
Let's just have the both, okay? Because we're going to be talking about the both. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So from a legal perspective, growing up as a kid, I was very competitive. I like to compete in sports. I like to argue with my big sister. I just found myself to be a competitive person. And I viewed that I quickly realized in high school that I wasn't athletic enough to be an athlete and at least make a living on it. And I viewed law as a form of competition, somewhere where I could go in and use my talents and my desire to advocate and win in a successful fashion. I also viewed the law as a way to help others. I think that any profession that allows us to not just serve yourself but to serve others is a good one. And I think lawyers play a very important role in our society, and the practice of law is a noble profession and one that I enjoy. In terms of representing survivors of sexual assault, Elijah, my view is there's no better way I can make use of a law degree than helping children or helping adults who have been sexually assaulted. I think being a father of four particularly inspires me in that way. I don't want anything to ever happen to any child in any state, in any country, anywhere. And if I can use my skills as a lawyer to enact change or promote change that lessens the amount of childhood sexual assault that takes place in the world, then I'll feel at the end of the day and at the end of my career that I did a good job. I think childhood sexual assault has no place in our society, and that those who perpetrate it need to be held accountable, whether that's the individual that does it being held accountable by going to jail, or whether that's perhaps a corporation or an institution that employed that perpetrator and enabled him or her to get away with their assaults on children. Hopefully the lawsuits that I bring create change and cause those corporations to do a better job.
Beautiful. For the presence of people like you, all right, I tend to have some kind of confidence. When I hear in the news where the perpetrator did that terrible act, and the world is just so corrupt now. But realizing that there are still folks who uphold the truth and want justice, there is this joy that I have within me, and that's why I said you're doing a great job. Okay, I'm just so curious. Can you share some? Yeah, yeah. So maybe you can just keep them anonymous. Some cases of, where you did your job and, you know, any stories like that. Can you share any case with us?
Sure, sure. So, I have a number that come to mind, but let me start with one. I recently resolved a case after about 3 years of litigation in Sacramento, which is obviously the capital of the state of California up north. In that case, I had the privilege of representing six male individuals who, when they were students in high school, were all sexually abused by a single teacher. And that high school was a private high school, and it was affiliated with a church. So we filed that lawsuit. In connection with it, that lawsuit received extensive media attention, starting with the front page of the local newspaper and spreading nationally. And what that lawsuit did was immediately bring awareness to the problem and the existence of this perpetrator. That perpetrator was immediately fired from his job. That perpetrator later was outed, so to speak, and will never teach kids again, which is obviously a great thing. That through the lawsuit, then we focused our attention on the school and the church itself and all the things it did wrong to allow the abuse of these six kids to happen. That church no longer operates. The school no longer operates. So at the end of the day, my six clients received not only a beneficial financial result from the lawsuit itself, but they created real change. They brought down a perpetrator who was still teaching, who will never teach again. And they brought down a church and a school that no longer operates and thus is no longer in a position to potentially harm future kids. I think that the non-monetary award of that, meaning those results, if you ask my clients if they were here on your podcast, Elijah, they would tell you it means more to them than the dollar amount itself that they receive.
That's right. I tell you, the feeling of getting justice, nothing can beat that feeling. No matter the amount you give someone, if justice hasn't taken its course, that pain will still be there, so strongly. That's a great story, and I love that. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
the outcome. I do.
survivors,
Yeah.
yeah, survivors of sexual assault, they often suffer in silence. They keep it to themselves. They don't tell a lot of people about it because, for any number of reasons, could be self-blame, could be fear of not being believed, any number of things. So when those survivors actually have the ability to come forward and file a case, and again, setting aside the monetary aspect of it, what they're doing is being heard. What they're doing is telling the world that what happened to them was not okay. And what they're doing is telling the world that they're there to fight for themselves and they're there to hold those responsible accountable.
Beautiful. That's right. But you see, I believe for every righteous person in a city, there will be a lot of enemies, a lot of folks who are wanting to bring that person down. So can you share some maybe challenges or tough moments, tough times where you had some issues, and can you share how you overcame them? It could be maybe personally or professionally.
So, on a professional level, I will say again, I tell everybody that asks me, what do you do for a living? And I say all the time that, I have the privilege of representing individuals, both children and adults, who have been sexually abused. And I do consider it a privilege. I consider it an honor that those people are willing to trust me to guide them down the journey towards healing in association with the lawsuit. But there are challenges associated with that. That's the subject matter of the cases that I have is horrific. The stories that I hear, the photographs I might encounter, the documentation and the medical records that show how an individual survivor has suffered throughout his or her life as a result of the abuse is hard. It's a heavy subject to deal with as a lawyer. I have a team full of people that help me, obviously, and each one of us take that home at night. And it's not like you can just walk out the door of our law firm and forget about the horrific events that you just spent the last 8-10 hours working on. So it does create some personal challenges for all of us. We carry that trauma with them. Again, we do so proudly. We choose to do this. We don't have to represent individuals that go through assaults like this. We choose to, but it is difficult, and it breaks my heart. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't come home at night and cry at times, or just need to express some form of emotion to my wife. And I think my kids would be the first one to tell anyone that I'm very protective, probably because of fear that something like that could happen to my kids.
It's tough. I get it, man. It's very tough. And thank God for people like you and what you're doing, because it would have been tougher if folks like you aren't out there getting justice for these victims. That's a good one you're doing. So, you see, I'm concerned about running a law firm across multiple states. So, what are some essential strategies to effectively run a law firm across multiple states? Can you talk to us about that?
Of course. Yeah, great question. So, again, my role at this law firm is the managing partner. And what that essentially means is that I oversee and supervise the day-to-day operations of the firm, not just in terms of the handling of the cases, but also from, for example, Elijah, marketing, or from employee relations, any number of things. So I personally believe that to be an effective leader, you have to be present. Leaders need to be seen, not just heard on the phone or heard through an email, but to be a truly effective leader, you have to have a presence. That means for me that I have, 3 or 4 different offices that I have to travel to and try to do so as much as I can, but I can't always be there. And it's a challenge. I spend nights away from my family to go to, for example, an office in, state of Nevada that we have, or if I have a case in New York. I have an office in Los Angeles and Orange County, California, and that, for those viewers who are familiar with it, will say, well, hey, that's only 30 miles. Yeah, but it's 30 miles in Southern California traffic, which can take you 3 hours to get there, right? So I think the biggest challenge of running a law firm of our size with multiple offices is just being present enough. I'm very self-critical. I am not present enough. The office that I'm based out of, sure, I'm there quite a bit, but that's to the detriment of employees that I have in those other offices. I also think, one of the challenges is just, every market's different. There are nuances to every location that you go in the United States or within particular states. What works in Los Angeles doesn't mean it's going to work for me in my office in New York. And what works in New York doesn't mean that that's what's going to work in Nevada. You have to realize that, accept it, and learn from others in terms of, what individual customers want in different locations, what your employees want or desire from a happiness perspective in different locations. Because these small nuances, these small differences can really make a big difference overall in the handling of a firm. And how well our firm operates, I believe, directly corresponds to how good of a service we provide to our clients.
I got that. I got that. That was well explained. Okay. Which upcoming challenges in employment law do you foresee gaining prominence? I don't know if you got that.
Yeah, sure. No, I did. That's a great question. So employment laws are vast. There are many, many laws that apply. And I will say, for the benefit of the listeners out there, that laws in every state are different, laws in every country are different. So I'm going to provide a very general perspective that may not apply to an individual person given their location. But one of the big issues I see, Elijah, that you might be interested in is the existence of what I'm going to call damages caps for employment cases. And what that means is that, certain states and even certain federal laws, the statute that gives rise to those laws actually limits how much an individual employee can recover in a specific case. And it does so by setting a dollar amount often that corresponds to how big the employer is. So for example, the law might say that if an employer only has 25 employees, then the maximum amount that any employee can receive in an employment lawsuit is $100,000. Versus if an employer has 500 or more employees, the maximum amount might be $300,000. Whatever it is, again, varies depending on which state or statute you're talking about. The point I'm trying to raise in terms of to answer your question is, I believe that caps like these actually are detrimental and harmful to employees and harmful to employee rights. Because, the emotional distress, the impact that someone endures as a result of something like sexual harassment, maybe it's age discrimination, whatever wrong is at issue, that varies. And it varies depending on the severity of what that employee was subjected to, right? So why should these legislatures in different states create laws, many of which were created years ago, that set an artificial limit as to what an individual's case is worth or what they can recover in a case? Does that promote employers to do the right thing and not discriminate against people? I don't think so. I think what promotes employers to treat their employees fairly, to not allow sexual harassment or to not engage in discriminatory practices, is to have to look at a jury of their peers in a courtroom, in a trial, and allow that jury to decide how much money will properly compensate an employee who was wronged. Not a statute, not a law written years ago in a room and voted on by a certain set of politicians, but instead a jury of your peers, which we all have a right to in the United States, who get to determine the harm that someone suffers. So I think there's a lot of changes, hopefully, in the law that's forthcoming in that regard. Whether those damages caps will be eliminated is probably, it depends on the state. Maybe the damages caps are increased to promote employers to treat their employees more fairly and to give access to employees to the courtroom so that they can go in and have their case heard. But to answer your question, I think, an emerging area of employment law are the rightfulness or the fairness of those damage caps.
Rightfulness and the fairness of those caps. Okay, I think I got that. You see, I would have to listen to our conversation over and over again because you shared with us some amazing stuff, I tell you. And that's why I love to speak to folks like you. I get to learn some new stuffs. That's a good one. Okay, so to bring this to an end, Brian, what would you like to leave the audience with? Like a final thought, final takeaway? And to those who would like to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing, or maybe they have a case that they feel like they should share with you or talk to you about, how can that be possible?
Yeah, sure, of course. So first, from a contact perspective, if you go on the internet, my firm has a website. It's ggtriallaw.com. If you Google Greenberg Gross, you'll find it. And one of the first lawyers listed is me. So contact information, probably the easiest thing for your listeners is go to our website and we'd love to hear from you. You know, in terms of final thoughts, I think the perspective I'd like to share is that, unfortunately, bad things happen in the world, and they do. Whether that's something as heinous as sexual assault, whether that's someone who's wrongfully terminated, whether that's someone who gets into, a car accident on their way to work, whatever, right? Bad things unfortunately happen. And I'd like to think that lawyers like myself and firms like mine are there to help people when they need it. We provide a unique set of skills and a unique set of services to help try to undo those wrongs. Some of those wrongs are more challenging and more prevalent than others. Undoing a wrong from a rear end accident is very different than trying to get a church to stop their practices that lead to childhood sexual assault. But for listeners out there that have these types of issues or concerns, don't ever underestimate the value that you bring in terms of your ability to make change. It only takes one survivor of abuse coming forward to bring down a school, to bring down a teacher. Like in the example I told you, it only takes one employee who was discriminated against because of, say, a disability to come forward and shine light on that situation and lead that employer to practice their ways differently. So, for your listeners out there, don't underestimate the power that you have to effectuate change.
Don't ever underestimate the value you bring to make change. Brian, I got that. Beautiful. So that's gonna be the end of the show, Brian. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing this, you know, powerful insight with us. It means a whole lot, man. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.